Einen schönen guten Tag und herzlich willkommen zur
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. A very warm welcome to the EUROGUSS Studio Edition from Nuremberg on what should have been the first day of the trade fair EUROGUSS 2022. Let me briefly introduce myself. I am Christopher Boss. I'm the Executive Director of EUROGUSS at Nürnberg Messe. And together with Martin Vogt, I'm going to be your host for approximately 90 minutes.
Thank you for the introduction, Chris. My name is Martin Vogt. I lead the media and press public relations at Haus der Gießerei in Düsseldorf, the center of the various associations in Germany, and I am the editor-in-chief of Gießerei magazine. Both of us will be taking you through the next 90 minutes, and we are very much looking forward to welcoming our guests, to be they at home or behind their monitors or at the studio.
Now, before we get started, perhaps some of you may have wondered, what is EUROGUSS Studio Edition all about? What is Nuremberg Messe doing here? Is it going to be one of these, numerous virtual trade fairs that we've seen so many of over the past couple of months and years, indeed? Clear answer is no. EUROGUSS Studio Edition is not a substitute for EUROGUSS, and it's not going to be a virtual trade fair, and it's certainly not it shouldn't replace personal encounters, which is something that we've all been waiting for and been looking forward to, over the past few months. However, when it was decided that EUROGUSS would be postponed to the 8th to 10th of June, it was quite clear that, it was not a good idea to have the start of the year without EUROGUSS.
Right, that doesn't feel right. We agreed, both Nürnberg Messe and the House of Gießerei agreed on this. There are simply far too many exciting and important industry topics. We are living in very exciting times indeed. All of us know about Corona, that impacts some of us, but let me also drop some buzzwords such as sustainability, energy prices, the energy crisis to a certain extent, young talents, raw materials. All of this has been exacerbated by Corona. And these are topics that we will be talking about in the next 1.5 hours. And apart from that, we'll also be holding the first European die-casting competition.
Of course, very much looking forward to that. But ladies and gentlemen, we've made a point of actively including you in this show. You can do so by various channels. There is a chat window which should have opened on your screen. Feel free to submit your comments and your questions if you have any. And when it comes to questions, if we have enough time, we will certainly try and include them in the upcoming panel discussion. Also, it's very important for you to submit your vote when it comes to the recognition or the presentation of the Audience Award later on. Now, in order to try this out, to do a dry run, we would like to see how it goes. You are going to see a QR code shortly, and I'd like to ask you to scan this QR code with your smartphone. As an alternative, you might as well go to menti.com, enter the code 84474042. Now, let's start with a pretty straightforward question before it gets more difficult later on when you have to cast your vote on the components. Now, Martin.
Well, the international dimension of this trade fair has, of course, been mentioned several times, and that's also why we have simultaneous interpreting into English available here. I hope that many participants will be listening to it. However, what's our internationality ratio at EUROGUSS?
Well, what do you think? What is the international participation at EUROGUSS?
Well, I don't know. I think we have around 200 countries, officially recognized countries around the world. At least that's my guess. And if we cover around 20% of that as customers, and I think we'd be quite well positioned.
Well, if memory serves me right, you're not that far away. 35 countries, this is the number. There's exhibitors coming from 35 countries, and the visitors are even more. Germany, of course, Italy, Turkey, Austria, Spain. And, when you look at the cities that are shown on the screen, Regensburg, Erlangen, Rousseau, Nuremberg. Now, you need to know, ladies and gentlemen, that there is a certain delay. You are seeing us a little later than we can see you. Now, anyway, you can see where people are coming from that are following us today, and it's very impressive to see, what a response this event is meeting with. Of course, Nuremberg, then there's Stuttgart, and I can also see Velbert.
Yes, well, I'm reading this correctly. That's next to Düsseldorf. So I think, yeah, quite a lot of cities represented here, also from Western Germany.
And we're certainly looking forward to welcome you at the EUROGUSS later on. Now, here's the first guest today.
Yes, I am pleased to welcome Rolf Köller, member of the management board at Nürnberg Messe. Welcome to the EUROGUSS studio.
Good afternoon and grüß Gott, ladies and gentlemen. We're pleased to see that so many have joined us, both in the studio and following us from your desks and your screens.
Mr. Keller, you have joined us here for obvious reasons. We have had to change our agenda for 2022, and I think you may have thought that this would turn out differently with regard to this trade fair year, so to say. But let's see, what are your expectations for 2022?
Well, Mr. Vogt, you are right. We had a completely different idea of the beginning of 2022. Had you asked me 1 year ago, no one would have believed, to be in a situation like this, because we assumed that we would start, off a pretty standard business year. Nevertheless, we are looking at 2022 on a positive note, even though Omicron is still dominating the situation. There's going to be 70 events this year, which makes for a pretty packed agenda, and Christopher Boss just mentioned it. Today should have been the first official day of the trade fair, so I must say this on a pretty sad note, but nevertheless we are having this hybrid event here, and there's going to be more of these kind of events in the run-up to June, when we'll be meeting in person at EUROGUSS in Nuremberg. Now, looking at 2022, well, a lot of things have been postponed. We all know that 2022 is a year where we're going to see lots of trade fairs, postponed, which comes with huge challenges for the exhibition industry, for the exhibitors themselves, for the visitors. So remains to be seen, how 2022 will turn out. However, if you take a closer look at, January and February, there is a Biofach, another trade fair, then there's, other trade fairs. All of these trade fairs will take place this year, and the second half year will be pretty packed again. There's going to be a trade fair on packaging, gardening, landscaping. This will be important meeting points for the industry.
So let's get back to EUROGUSS. What was the reaction in general with regard to the postponement? And from your perspective, what were the key arguments for doing so?
Well, first and foremost, Mr. Vogt, it was important for us to be making this decision together with the participants, together with the market participants, not against them. So the entire exhibition team early on, back in November, felt that because of the pandemic situation and how, the pandemic unfolded, it was quite clear that, we had to reach out to our customers proactively. And as we entered December, we started reaching out to the other market participants, started talking to the exhibitors, and we soon found that it was not quite clear what the situation would be like come January. And in order to, adding insult to injury, there were lots of travel bans for exhibitors, for visitors, especially from the automotive industry. So there was no guarantee, for us to actually go ahead with the trade fair in January. And if you add the political situation, which was difficult to predict, we decided, to try and keep a low profile. We didn't know what the restrictions would be like, which is why, together with the market participants, we decided to postpone the trade fair, as Christoph Boss just mentioned. Now, let me tell you that, the attended trade, or that the, share of exhibitors who are supporting this step is almost at 100%, and this means that this is a joint effort.
Then let us look towards June. Hopefully the EUROGUSS trade fair will be taking place in June. That's what we hope. Chris, can you give us an outlook as to what might happen at the trade fair in June?
Happy to do that. Hopefully the weather will be much better, much more sun, but on a more serious note, as Rolf Keller just mentioned, a lot of exhibitors have already confirmed their participation for the new date. the 8th to 10th of June 2022. And additionally, we have received a number of requests from companies who weren't quite sure about the January date, but now they've decided to be part of the trade fair. And I'm particularly happy to see how important EUROGUSS is for the industry, and more importantly, the role of personal encounters at trade fairs. What else? Well, the framework program was taken over 100% from January to June, and I've been told by, some of the associations who are supporting us and who are organizing the German Die Casting Congress, many of the speakers have already confirmed their attendance. And certainly we will come up with more interesting ideas for the exhibitors and visitors.
Well, thanks to you both, Chris and Mr. Keller. Thank you for sharing your views here, and I would say that we can all look forward to meeting in person in June.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's move on to perhaps one of the first highlights of today's show, which is the first European Die Casting Award in the Zinc category. Now, Martin, when we launched the call for submissions, we did that together, and you may remember that this was quite successful back in summer.
Yes, this was very interesting indeed, because in September, many small or large parcels reached Haus der Gießerei in Düsseldorf, and I can already say that this can be seen as a joint success, simply because two very strong partners, namely Nürnberg Messe and Haus der Gießerei Industrie, joined forces in order to carry out this new competition.
And I'd like to take the opportunity to thank you. This was great fun, and it met with a great response. On the 7th of October, I was not present at the jury meeting, but perhaps you would like to share some insights what this meeting was like.
Yes, well, it was a dynamic meeting, officially a meeting. There wasn't much sitting down. Indeed, it's you can see this here on the wall behind us. You can see images of the jury session. There were 10 members of the jury who would be presenting later on. They went from table to table, looking at the different components, picking them up, evaluating them. And there's a very optical and haptical element to all of this, and you literally have to grasp these pieces.
Can I ask you, was there some sort of system that you applied? How did you evaluate the components?
Yes, of course it is not enough to just grasp or touch them in that sense. Of course that's very important, but at the end of the day it's very important to also have certain criteria, to determine certain criteria along which you actually evaluate the components. All of the members of the jury had this list at hand. You can also see that here on the chart. And I would just like to mention a couple of the categories that played a role here. I can think of buzzwords such as innovation, functional integration, tolerances, surface quality, substitution, substitution of other materials in that sense, challenges in the serial process, and many more. Talking about scaling effects. That means looking at whether the prototypes can actually be produced can go into serial production, and also looking at topicality. How relevant are the solutions proposed by the exhibitors or by the participants? And all of that leads to a point ranking at the end of the day.
Now, I've learned that it was a pretty tight race, and today we're only going to take a look at the components in top positions. However, I'd like to use the opportunity to thank all those companies who submitted their components and who did not end up amongst the winners this year. So we would like to encourage you, keep your components coming also next year for the next competition, and please do show what the industry is capable of doing, how innovative the industry is. And we would also like to call upon foundries from other countries in Europe to be part of the award. Having said that, we don't keep you waiting much longer. I suggest that we get right down to business and announce the first 3 winners in the Zinc category. Let's start the film. is place 3. It's a clamp plate. Substitution of 5 milled parts, large surfaces and requirements, accessibility from 5 sides. This comes with huge requirements. 3rd place. Second place. Switch handle from the automotive industry, using technological possibilities, to realize the product function with an innovative design. It's a hybrid part, internal cable routing. This is the 2nd place. Here comes the 1st place in the zinc category. It's an assembly consisting of 3 die-cast parts, housing, lid and front, with some very high tolerance requirements, thin walls, wall thickness. You can see the figures here. So this is the 1st place in the zinc category.
Ja, das sind sie also, die ersten 3.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, you've seen the first 3 positions in the zinc category, and we're very happy indeed to be able to announce some of the representatives amongst the winning entries. I'd like to welcome from Teilmacher GmbH the General Manager Niki Frank and the Head of Production Axel Holz. Please do join us here on stage. Congratulations to you on, the 3rd place in the zinc category. Congratulations.
Herzlichen Glückwunsch, genau, hier die Urkunde.
Also die Themen? Danke.
Genau, wenn Sie möchten, auch noch.
Ja, vielen Dank für den Preis.
Would you like to say a few words? Thank you very much for the award, and on behalf of the entire team, we're very happy to be receiving this award here today. Congratulations, and thank you very much for your visit.
Ja, damit kommen wir zum Rang 2.
Well, and now we move on to the 2nd place. Winner was HDO Druckguss und Oberflächentechnik GmbH.
Den Vertriebsleiter Michael
And we can welcome the Head of Sales, Michael Schäffer.
Herzlichen Glückwunsch zum 2. Preis.
Congratulations on the 2nd place. You can carry them both. Mr. Schäffer, congratulations.
Genau, auch an Sie.
Stolz, nehmen wir die Preise mit.
I'm very proud to take these awards home. And of course, it is an award for the entire team. Congratulations.
Ja, und dann kommen wir schon zum ersten Preis.
Now, this gets us to the 1st place in the zinc category. Hans Aber, General Manager of Siegfried Müller GmbH. Very warm welcome to you. And of course, we'd also like to congratulate you on ending up in the 1st position in the zinc category. Congratulations from us.
Congratulations from me too.
Well, thank you very much to the jury. I'm overwhelmed to be ending up in position number 1. So to be receiving this award is something that makes us immensely proud. Thank you very much, and all the best. Congratulations once again on winning the 1st prize of the zinc category.
Ja, stellvertretend für die Jury dürfen wir jetzt
On
den
behalf of the jury, we may now ask our colleague Tobias Renix,
und Innovation
is responsible for technology and innovation at the BDG, the German Association of the German Foundry Industry, and he may share his expert opinion with us. Let's start the film.
Zunächst ein Hallo und guten Tag.
First of all, hello, good day to all of you who are joining us digitally. I'm speaking on behalf of the colleagues of the jury, and I would like to welcome you to today's presentation of the winners of the first European die casting competition. We just saw the awards for the components made of zinc, and we heard some information about the evaluation. Now, when we look at the specific features that convinced the jury with regard to these components, I can say the following. Let's start with zinc. In the first place, we saw a very fine assembly with thin walledness, less than 0.7 millimeters, low-lying ribbings, and apertures And of course, there were other positive aspects, such as the diversity in terms of the variations. In the second place, we specifically honored the fact that technological possibilities were used in order to further innovative design and also functionality and haptic aspects. There was actually a temperature-resistant plastic inlet that was encapsulated. And when we looked at the third place, we saw that it was impressive to see 5 milled parts that were substituted by one single die casting component. With tight tolerances, it actually meets the high requirements with regard to die casting quality.
Thank you very much, Tobias Rennings, for your assessment, and this video was recorded before today's show. Now, participants, why don't you try and remember who was your favorite in the zinc category? Because, as we mentioned before, you will have the opportunity towards the end of the show to be part in awarding the Audience Award. So your vote will certainly count when it comes to determining the winner of the Audience Award. Before we move on to the next item on today's agenda, we would like to share, some of the emotions and voices of the winners of today's competition. Here we go.
Hallo, liebes BD-GUSS-Team, liebe Jury.
Dear BD-GUSS team, dear jury, we're very happy to be receiving this award because the switch is part of our future technology, which allows us to do the integration of a cable routing, and despite the sophisticated dimensions, we were able to come up with a galvanized cool touch surface. So once again, thank you very much. We are overwhelmed and very happy indeed. Congratulations to the winners in the zinc category. Now, let's move on to the next item. Headline is, engineering the way ahead, why the die casting industry needs young talents. Now, you may have heard the first part of this title, Vorsprung durch Technik. Exactly, this is the slogan that Audi has been using for 50 years, proactively promoting technical progress. Now, what is this to do with EUROGUSS? What is this to do with die casting? Well, I guess all those of you who, are active in this field will know how innovative, how modern the industry is. However, this has gone unnoticed by many outside the industry. And I would like to come out of that particular closet, because before I joined EUROGUSS in 2016 first, I didn't really know a lot about die casting. I had to do a Google search to find out what it's all about. Now, in my defense, let me tell you that I have a business administration background, but I guess this would also apply to other people who, have different associations, such as heat and noise and smoke. And this will certainly be one of the reasons why the industry seems to have difficulties recruiting young talent. And this is also why we decided to start the EUROGUSS Talent Award 2020. I'm very happy to be able to announce the first live guests at this show at the EUROGUSS studio. A very warm welcome to Franz Josef Wüstmann from Fraunhofer EFAM, the chairman of the jury of the EUROGUSS Talent Award. Very warm welcome to you. And I would also like to welcome Dr. Patrick Reichen in Switzerland from Bühler AG and Frank Gansky from GF Casting Solutions. A very warm welcome to you, gentlemen.
Ja, Franz Josef, ich erinnere mich noch.
Now, Franz Josef, I remember exactly what our discussion was all about, prior to EUROGUSS 2020, when we decided to start the EUROGUSS Talent Award. Perhaps you would like to share with the audience what this was like. I've already mentioned one reason for us to start the award. Would you like to contribute?
Gerne. Chris?
Of course. Chris, I would also like to wish everyone a successful and good start into the new year 2022. And I'm, of course, sad that we couldn't carry out, that the trade fair couldn't take place, but it pleases me that we can meet virtually. Now, this idea of creating this award was that EUROGUSS is actually a platform that could also be used for students. So when it comes to die casting, this would be an international guiding trade fair for students that could also be a platform into professional life, and that gives it a certain visibility where they actually showcase their innovative ideas and they can present them straight to industry partners. And in that regard, this is an insight for students into what's happening internationally, and also gives them the opportunity to create networks, to network in general.
So, kommen wir direkt nochmal weiter zu den Kollegen von Bühler.
Then let's move on to the colleagues from Bühler and
Der Award,
GF.
den wir 2020 begonnen haben.
First of all, we started this award in 2020, and we already had participants back then from various countries around the world, especially from partner countries at EUROGUSS, such as Mexico and India. And at the time, we were able to award the first 4 winners, at the time from Germany, Spain, and Mexico. These winners had created their works in cooperation with universities and industry partners. And all of the winners, or participants who had submitted their works, were invited to Nuremberg, and they had the opportunity to actually join the speakers' corners at the first day of the exhibition in order to present their works. They then received awards for them. They received an award, which I think was an iPad, and the entire trip was sponsored by the trade fair. Now, ever since, EUROGUSS has been the last trade fair that took place in this area, and I hope that with the upcoming EUROGUSS will be the next trade fair that also provides a stepping stone once again. And for EUROGUSS 22, we also relaunched the awards, and I'm very happy to say that once again we have high-ranking international jury members that we were able to recruit. And apart from the jury, we also have an important building block, namely the company GF and Bühler, which are, of course, important sponsoring partners that also support the students. Now, unfortunately, the pandemic is still happening. That's why things have been a little bit more limited due to travel restrictions and some hesitation with regards to submissions. But nonetheless, I can say that there have been many more international submissions, but actually more German submissions that have compensated for a lack of them. And I hope that in 2022 we will be able to present many more ideas for EUROGUSS 2022. And now getting back to the sponsors. Mr. Gensi, you are responsible for innovation. So what motivated you to participate in this award as a sponsor?
Thank you very much. I'd also like to extend a warm welcome to all of you. Now, innovation is part of our genetic code at GF Casting. In addition to operational excellence and our global reach, this is one key pillar. And we also care about performance and learning, and that's why being a sponsor is both an extreme pleasure and a necessary consequence. Now, our contribution to the Talent Award allows students to benefit from the, good aspects of die casting, and we would also like to make them enthusiastic about die casting. Networking is also key, establishing networks with the education institutes, because this allows us to recruit young talent. Now, the Talent Award is a great means of, beating the drum for the industry and winning new talents for the die casting industry.
Herzlichen Dank, Herr Gensti.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gensti. Mr. Reichen, Bühler AG is also supporting the awards as a sponsor. Why do you think should the students absolutely take part in this competition? Thank you very much.
I'd also like to welcome all of you. Now, the Talent Award allows students to prepare and to present themselves at an international platform. It makes for great visibility. So the award is not only a recognition of high-quality work, but at the same time, it's a great platform for exchange, for innovation drivers, and, especially for, the academia. It also allows students to expand their networks and get in touch with innovative companies at the same time.
Herzlichen Dank. Abschließend nochmal aufgrund der Zeitschiene.
Thank you very much. Just a quick final question to both of you. Why should no one from our industry miss the presentation of this year's winners? Mr. Gensi, what do you think?
Well, I believe we're going to see a lot of innovation, new product ideas, which will come with a potential for many players in the industry. If you're innovative, if you want to develop further, you should be a part of the award.
Was sagen Sie, warum die Kollegen aus
Mr. Reichen, what do you think? Why do you think should the colleagues from die casting join us?
Well, in addition to the reasons that Mr. Gensky already mentioned, innovation, high-level research, the Talent Award is a must also for people having HR responsibility, because this is a unique channel, to reach out to people who have already in-depth knowledge in the die-casting industry. So we're looking forward to the award and getting to know the finalists later on.
Thank you very much to Mr. Reichen and Mr. Gensky. Thank you also for all of your support in the run-up to this award. And to all of those working in die casting, I would like to say that we look forward to meeting you at the award ceremony on the 8th of June in Munich, and to also present you new ideas and young talent. So see you at EUROGUSS.
Vielen Dank in die Runde. Vielen Dank für den kurzen Ausflug in die.
Thank you very much to the panelists. Thanks for shedding some light on young talent. However, I have to correct you on one item. This is taking place in Nuremberg, and coming from Franconia, that's very important. Now, you mentioned a number of interesting things, and it's going to be very interesting to see the 5 young graduates, as they compete for the award at the trade fair in June. So I'd like to thank the jury, who've done an excellent job selecting the shortlist. Thanks is also due to the sponsors, Bühler and GF Casting Solutions. Thank you very much to both of you. Now, speaking of innovation and fresh ideas, Martin, this is a rather elegant transition to the presentation of the award in the Magnesium category. We're going to talk about bigger dimensions and more lightweight dimensions.
Absolutely, and that brings us to our second category. You named it, magnesium. It's a material that is impressively light. And here, too, the jury awarded a number of prizes.
Speaking about the jury, I think I've mentioned it before. This was a high-ranking jury, and we had to assess quite ambitious projects. Let me tell you who the experts were. So I'd like to present you to the jury.
It is my pleasure. I have to take a deep breath, actually, because we have 10 jury members with interesting biographies, very competent people who I'm very pleased to present here. We have Professor Martin Fehlbier from the Department of Foundry Technology at the University of Kassel, Götz Hartmann, Executive Manager at Magma from Aachen, Professor Lothar Kalin from the Faculty of Materials Technology and Mechanical Engineering in Aalen, Martin Lagler, Director of Product Management and Marketing at Bühler, Dr. Tim Nikolaou, Manager Director at Oscar Frech GmbH, my colleague Tobias Rennings, responsible for Technology and Innovation Officer at the BEG, Didier Rollet, Sales and Consulting at Grillo Werke, Martin Taube from the International Magnesium Association, Stuart Wiesner, Head of Product and Business Development at Aluminium Rheinfelden Alloys GmbH, and Franz Josef Förstmann, who we've just seen, Head of Department Technology Early Recognition and Utilization at Fraunhofer IFAM.
Goes to show that there's a broad range of expertise on the panel, that's for sure. And I can well imagine, what the discussion must have been like and how difficult it may have been to award a winner in the magnesium category. But, ladies and gentlemen, see for yourself who the jury finally selected in positions number 1 to 3.
Place. Cone holder replaces a plastic component. Realization of a tool time that's 4 times higher, higher solidity and accuracy without mechanical treatment. And these are the dimensions, as well as the weight and the alloy. Third place, Dynacast Deutschland GmbH. Second place. TKS AT Tabletop. high-quality surface finishing. Requirements with regard to evenness of 0.5 millimeters across the entire surface. Second place, Turmbach Magnesium GmbH, Schönberg, Germany. First place. Crossbar beam, HUD, instrument panel. Methodological approach regarding development and construction integrates various functions, stiffness and NVH requirements, crash-relevant component. Here are the dimensions and the weights. First place, GF Casting Solutions, Schaffhausen.
Ja, das war's ja auch schon. Die zweite Kategorie Magnesium.
That's it. The second category, the magnesium category. Once again, we are pleased to be able to welcome representatives from the successful companies. Now, for third place in the magnesium category, I'd like to invite Wolfgang Voigt, Head of Sales and Marketing, Dynacast, Germany. Welcome in the studio. Here is your award. Congratulations on the third place in the magnesium category.
Der Preis
Von mir auch herzlichen Glückwunsch. Ihre Urkunde.
Congratulations from me too. Here's your certificate.
Sie, ähnlich wie bei der Oscarverleihung, die Möglichkeit.
And similar to the Oscars, would you like to make a few words? Thanks to the jury for the award and thanks to the Dynacast team for all the work you've put in.
Herzlichen Glückwunsch.
Thank you very much and congratulations once again.
Kommen wir zu Rang 2.
Now, second place.
Der zweite Platz geht an die Turmbach
Second
Magnesium
place
GmbH.
goes to Turmbach Magnesium GmbH. We welcome Dr. Kalleberg, Managing Partner.
Herzlichen Glückwunsch zum zweiten.
Congratulations and second place in the magnesium category.
Einmal, Sie dürfen
Sehr gerne. Auch Ihre Urkunde.
genau die Hände.
And your certificate.
Auch für Sie noch mal kurz.
Dankeschön. Also wir freuen uns sehr.
Thank you very much. Very happy indeed to be amongst the winners. Thanks is due to our customers, because it was together with the customers that we developed this part. Thanks is also due to the whole team who helped make this come true. Thanks to all of you and thanks to you too. Congrats and thanks for dropping by. Now, moving on to place one. Congratulations to the winner in the magnesium category, GF Casting Solutions, Stefan Philipp, Team Leader, Product Development, Body and Structure. Congratulations. Here is your award.
Auch von mir herzlichen Glückwunsch. Ihre Urkunde.
Congratulations. Here is your certificate.
Gebe Ihnen auch noch mal das, oder ich halte es genau.
Ja,
Would you like to say something? Thank you very much for the award of the first place in the magnesium category. Thanks is due to the GF team. I'd like to particularly thank Sebastian Franke and the Altenmark factory for the support they have lent, and Daimler, one of our customers. Thank you very much. Thanks for participating and congratulations on winning the first prize.
Ja, man muss sagen, dass Magnesium wirklich schon ein
Yeah,
sehr
magnesium is really a very interesting type of material, not only because of its features, but also when it comes to procurement. I think in the last couple of months, this has been noticeable, and it's also going to be a topic during our panel discussion later on. So we're talking about supply chains, of course. But let's have a little look at the display of emotions amongst the winners here.
Werfen wir aus der Perspektive unserer Jury nochmal einen vertieften Blick.
From the viewpoint of our jury, let us look at the awarded magnesium components. In first place, we see a highly stressed component that also performs under dynamic circumstances. But also, in case of a crash, for instance, it is highly malleable. Especially with regard to the high flatness requirements of under 0.5 millimeters across the entire surface was something that convinced us when awarding our prizes. We are looking at a very large surface, thin-walled component, and another positive aspect was the weight saving of 1.2 kilograms compared to an aluminium component. Now, in third place, the jury noticed a very high usability under dynamic and stressful conditions. There are high casting qualities, high solidity and accuracy. It replaces a plastic component and also does without any mechanical treatment.
Das war natürlich Kollege Tobias Rennings mit den Einschätzungen.
That was our colleague Tobias Rennings with his evaluation. Now we'll look at the display of emotions.
Hallo zusammen, mein Name ist Uli Bakur.
Hi, all of you. Uli Bakur, I'm manager at GF Casting Solutions, and on behalf of the entire team, I'd like to thank you for the presentation of the Die Casting Award. Thanks is also due to our team, all of those who were involved and instrumental in the development. I'd like to thank Mercedes-Benz for the great cooperation and for today's host. Thank you very much.
Ja, an dieser Stelle auch nochmal Glückwunsch.
Okay, once again, congratulations to the 3 winners in the magnesium category, and I'd also like to thank you for the videos you've submitted. Let's move on to the next item on the agenda. Let's talk about sustainability, which is certainly one of the mega trends.
Jeder spricht aktuell darüber.
It's the talk of the town, and still, it probably means something different to different people. Which is why we decided to start the EUROGUSS Sustainability Survey, the first of its kind. How is the die casting industry positioned in this respect? What is the current status? And to answer these questions, I'm very happy to introduce to you Laura Theresa Heinle from the Chair of Sustainability Management of Nuremberg University, who's joining us remotely in the studio. Good afternoon, Laura.
Hello.
Now, before we look at the results of the survey, and I'm very curious, I have one question. At first glance, die casting industry and sustainability, how does this go together, if at all? What is your take on that?
Yes, that was a question that I also asked myself when starting the study. How does this go hand in hand? I'm not from the industry. I also didn't study mechanical engineering or anything of that sort. So for me, I just thought of large smoky factories, lots of waste of energy. And I was actually surprised to see that one of the participants in this study described the production facility as looking like a pharmacy, described it as being a very clean and comfortable place to work in. And the study clearly showed that that wasn't the case for just one company, but for many, and I thought that was quite exciting.
Thank you very much, and you may remember I mentioned it briefly at the beginning. Sustainability means something different to different people. Now, you are the expert. Perhaps in a nutshell, can you tell us what is the very definition of sustainability?
Ja, danke für die Frage. Das ist in der Tat.
Yes, thank you for the question. Indeed, the first question is always to think about what our understanding, our joint understanding of sustainability is, because there is no definition set down in the law. Most people think of sustainability as meaning long-term environmental protection. And most of the participants in the EUROGUSS study also thought that. However, this doesn't go far enough. In fact, sustainability can be translated somewhat as grandchildability, meaning that we should live in a way that even our grandchildren can live in proper, nice conditions. So you can also say, for instance, that this means that a company shouldn't go bankrupt, especially in family businesses. So sustainability is not only about spending money on environmental protection. It also means integrating it strategically into the business operations, and that's often left by the wayside. But of course, there are other aspects that come to play too, but I will show that later on in the results, how it all comes together. Now, with regard to the die casting industry, I actually thought that there was a growing recognition that this is not an island, especially due to EU legislation. Sustainability is an ever important issue for businesses.
Sounds very interesting indeed, and certainly makes all of us eager to learn more about the first results of this survey. Now, I'd like to hand over to you, Laura, and we're very much looking forward to the results you're going to present. You have the floor.
Danke, ich stelle mal hier kurz um, dass ich alles habe.
Thank you. Let me just make sure I've got everything here. Of course, just a couple of words about myself. I come from the Chair of Sustainability Management from the FAU in Nuremberg, and we deal with all kinds of topics related to sustainability, and that's why I was happy about the fact that the Nuremberg exhibition approached us with such an interesting survey. Now, what did we actually measure? First of all, we looked at what kind of groups exist in the industry, what kind of countries of origin are there that take take part in EUROGUSS, and then of course people in charge of the topic. Is there anyone responsible for this? And then of course the perceived relevance. So do I think that sustainability is very important, or do I think it's a thing of the past that I don't have to deal with anymore? And then we looked at customer requirements. So are there customers that ask you as a company about your sustainability activities? And then also questions about the activity along these three pillars. I think you can see them here. Social, economic and ecological. So as I said, sustainability is not only the green pillar, that is to say ecological, but also economic and social aspects. And so these are the three main topics or pillars that that sit under the roof of sustainability. And so we asked, with regards to these three aspects, what a company does. Here is a quick overview of the results. First of all, we saw that sustainability seems to be a very important issue for all of the companies. The value here is very high. That's also typical, because when people ask you how important you think something is, you rarely say that it's not important. But 4.23 on a scale of 1 to 5 is quite high and shows that it's a very topical issue. Then we also saw that the groups can't really be separated from each other. It's something that I had somewhat expected to find. Research and development might be more into this topic than other groups, or more than typical manufacturers or die casting foundries, but actually that wasn't the case. In every group there are certain front runners and others who still have potential. With regards to the country of origins, there was also a very mixed picture here. It seems to be the case that Germany and Italy are dealing with this topic particularly intensively, but that doesn't mean that other countries weren't making progress either. And then, of course, customer requirements count too. So if you are a customer, it's actually worth asking questions. Companies that say our customers ask about our sustainability activities also showed a higher level of activity when it comes to sustainability. Now, of course, we don't have a lot of time, so I'm not going to go into much detail, but I'm just going to present you an overview of the results and then talk about four issues in particular. First of all, we can see the average activity of the companies in the various areas: green, blue, and red. Green is ecological, blue economic, red is social. And here we see a very clear drop, a lower activity when it comes to climate neutrality. This is also maybe something that's still a bit far away. But another interesting thing is that when it comes to the circular economy, we can see a very high value here. So the issue of circular economies seems to be very relevant and known to most people in the industry. Then we have an interesting result here when it comes to importance and goals. Now, before I continue, I would like to say that importance means that you have already dealt with the main topics that exist in a company and that are related to sustainability, meaning that you may have already selected a certain strategy. And here, just as with climate neutrality, you can see a very low value. I will talk about that later. And later on, here's another result that stands out, namely, there's a lot of activities with regards to responsibility for personnel. So people want to take care of their staff, but participation plays a less important role, meaning that the relations with staff are taken care of, but there might be little participation by the employees. And I think this is something that could be improved in the industry in general. So much for participation. Now, coming to talk about the circular economy and the importance and goals, I want to talk about that in more detail, but as was already said, this is a preview. Of course, we're all looking forward to the live exhibition in summer, and we will actually be presenting the results in more detail over there and be able to talk about them more. So why is the circular economy so important for all of the participants and also for the exhibitors at EUROGUSS? I have a quote here that was found in the survey. In the metal industry, single-type scrapping is already very common practice. So you can see that recycling materials, treating them with care, trying to reuse them is something that is already very much practiced in the industry. And that's why some people said that they're already engaged in a circular economy. It also shows the success of legal requirements. Some have said we simply have to recycle. Nothing is bought that is not really needed, meaning that you also save money. And of course, when you have an opportunity to save money, you might also find that you are more sustainable. But what was also interesting is that many answers actually concerned recycling and not the circular economy. Circular economy means that from the very beginning, you think about how you design a product in order to ensure that it can later be dismantled and recycled into its single varieties. Now, for instance, if you look at the components, we also had a car component here earlier on, you would actually try to design the entire car in such a way that the beam that we saw there is made of aluminium or magnesium, for instance, that it can be extracted from the car, can be recycled and then reused. So there's a very intense thought process that goes into it. You have to talk about all of the participants in the supply chain, but this is definitely worth it because it also means that you can actively live the circular economy. Because what most people do is recycling. That's, of course, very useful too, but there's still room at the top, I would say. Now, the next interesting point was the importance and the goals. There was little activity here. Now, importance, of course, means to find out what are the most important points, and these analyses cost time and money. And once you start that, you actually want to take action. You don't want to spend lots of time on analyses and studies. At least that's what many people and companies think. And that's why this point is often somewhat neglected and regarded as an additional activity with regard to sustainability. This brings us back to one point that I mentioned in the beginning. If you keep seeing it as an add-on or as a nice-to-have, then you, of course, miss the opportunity of improving something in your processes in the long term. I also have a quote here. We analyzed the participants in this study. We analyzed the impact of die casting process that uses our molds. We developed a new, more sustainable process. This is a summary that shows very clearly that if you make the efforts to carry out analyses, then you can also develop a sustainability process off the back of that, and this again leads to cost savings. And this is something that actually makes this whole importance, the question of importance and goals, very interesting. Of course, there's potential here to be tapped into, and you can also become more cost efficient and sustainable if you plan strategically. So this is just these are just two very interesting points from the study. Of course, they will be presented live in summer at the exhibition. Now, our takeaways so far are as follows. For one, you can see that this is a very heterogeneous field. We can learn a lot from each other. The industry is keeping abreast with times. So it's ahead of the normal average, and especially with regards to the circular economy, you can actually make efforts in order to maintain your front-running position. And when it comes to the goals and the importance, then it's something that should actually be tackled urgently, especially if you think that your company has room for improvement here, because this could actually be a profit driver when it comes to sustainability. So much for the results so far, and I hand back to Chris.
Ja, vielen Dank dir für die Ergebnisse.
Thank you very much for these results. This was very interesting indeed.
Was ich auch interessant gefunden habe, ist, dass halt
There was something else I find quite interesting, which is that, all three components were affected by sustainability, both social, economical, and environmental components. We need to take a look at all of them, all three of them need to be given equal attention. So we're looking forward to the final results of the survey that are going to be presented at EUROGUSS in June of 2022. Now, the industry talk is next, and I'd like to welcome the three guests. Hartmut Fischer, Managing Director at Steel Magnesium Druckers, Dr. Johannes Ioannidis, Managing Director at Oscar Frecht GmbH, who is joining us remotely. Then there's Thomas Reuter, member of the Executive Executive Board of Chimit Aluminium SE. Now, we're going to spend the next 30 minutes or so to take stock of the situation at the beginning of 2022. What are the key issues that we are tackling? And of course, we will also try to identify what the future holds. And I'd like to make a call upon all of you, ladies and gentlemen. Keep your questions coming via the chat function. We will select them and, ask those which fit in with the panel discussion, which will certainly be a great contribution. Let's stay with sustainability for a minute. Sustainability is certainly a key issue, and it's also part of the trade fair slogan. Sustainability certainly includes renewable energies. And in the first few weeks of the new federal government, we've seen, a lot of action in the Ministry of Economic Affairs. The share is to be doubled by 2030, the share of renewables, according to the minister. Now, Mr. Fischer, you are working in a highly energy-intensive industry. What is your assessment, of these plans from the point of view of the industry as regards to the plans of the federal government?
Well, the proposals of the federal government are certainly right. They go in the right direction. We are sustainable when it comes to the materials. We already saw that earlier on. We are able to recycle. We have we can use our materials for a long time, but we're also very energy intensive. We need a lot of electrical energy or gas for our production, and this, of course, comes with certain requirements. So in that regard, I think this is the right direction, and we hope that it can be implemented as such. However, what we also need is a sense of security when it comes to planning and the framework conditions. As an industry, we will also be investing. We want to become sustainable, and we can already... This is already shown or mirrored in the fact that many die casting facilities are CO2 neutral. According to Scope 1 and 2, they also sometimes produce with green energy. That's why we also need more of it. Even green gas might be an interesting topic, something that we need to head towards, and I think we will be heading in that direction. And of course, if we can plan, then we can also invest, because without investments, we won't be able to do this.
Now, you mentioned a number of key words that we're going to talk about in the next 30 minutes or so. For the time being, let's stay with the question of how realistic is all that. Also looking at, the political structure in Germany, this is a very ambitious target in terms of renewable energies. What about you?
I think we have to be patient, and we need to work together. And we need to prepare well. We need to prepare for the opportunities as they arise. If you have energy, you need to transport it in order to be able to use it. But of course, with a bit of goodwill and patience, you can work towards that. But there's another thing that we need. We need all of those people to do who can actually support us, namely financial contributions. Because the industry has passed through 3 difficult years, needs to make investments, as Mr. Fischer said. It also wants to make investments. But of course, we need a certain level of support in order to be able to manage that.
Competitiveness is certainly something we're going to talk about in a minute. However, I'd like to include Mr. Reuter and give him the opportunity to comment on renewable energies. You have the floor.
Yes, I think the 2 previous speakers already mentioned important aspects. Energy has to be affordable. It isn't currently. That's a huge problem in Germany and in Europe. And secondly, we need to know how much energy we actually need in the future. Are we talking about 500, 600 or 700 terawatts? As aluminium producers, we have a very energy-intensive industry. And of course, we depend on the legislation. And if we look at the federal state in Germany, then we can see that, for instance, if you look at the comments made by Mr. Söller in the press, then we can see that that is sometimes an impediment to the progress that needs to be made.
Let's stay on the topic of federalism. Now, the figures were out there in the press. In 2021, Bavaria installed 10 wind turbine generators, only 10. So how does this, add up to the plans that we're currently discussing? I mean, is this realistic? And perhaps, Mr. Reuter, you would like to comment on that. Perhaps, Germany is lagging behind somewhat.
Yes, I think so. We really need to make sure that the countries outside of Europe, especially the Asian countries, don't overtake us. countries, because they, of course, don't have any federal structures. And they can implement things very quickly. But if we want to get approval for an offshore park in 8 years, for instance, we don't know what happens in that time. We don't have that time. We can't wait as long. Otherwise, our international competitors will overtake us. And I'm not necessarily thinking about Europe, but also about competitors in Asia and Northern America.
What's your take on that in terms of a lack of flexibility and approval procedures?
Yeah, there's a lot to be done here. You need to look at our neighboring countries. Maybe we can copy them in certain aspects and not reinvent the wheel over and over again. But I think we do have to make progress there.
Mr. Fischer, what about you?
Well, if we don't speed up, we won't meet our goals. Especially in the last couple of days, there were press reports about how many pages are necessary. I think 18,000 pages for the approval of a wind farm, and so much paper won't allow us to speed up as fast as we need to. We need to speed up in order to implement our goals.
Now, the expansion of renewable energies, is somewhat linked to what we've already addressed briefly. However, I'd like to dig a little deeper. Costs of energy. Now, energy costs over the past few months in Germany, in addition to the development, what we're seeing anyway, and we are at a disadvantage compared to other markets, have been spiraling out of control. Are you worried about that?
Yes, I'm very worried indeed, because the industry has been pioneering this for years. It's been working on this for years when it comes to reducing resources in a sensible way. We're looking out for everything, and now suddenly we're facing costs, huge costs. At the same time, we're expected to be investing, and then we're just exiting a phase where there was lots of capital that was used up during the crisis, and I think this is an immense factor. The cost factor is huge, that we need to tackle it, and we need to tackle it fast, as Mr. Fischer said. This is, of course, a topic that needs to be tackled and managed somehow.
Now, energy costs in an energy-intensive industry play a huge role. Now, yesterday, we could read it in Handelsblatt, Germany is leading, which is not a good thing because we're the most expensive ones all over Europe in terms of, industry electricity. And you may remember that from the past. There are companies, foundries who would like to expand, and I'm not necessarily looking to Asia, but rather to Eastern Europe. This is where, investment will be going. Investment leakage. This is what I'm talking about. And there's also going to be the phenomenon of carbon leakage. And that's something, that will hurt us quite a lot in Germany. And that's why I believe, we should try and establish a level playing field. Same competitive conditions for everybody, not only in Europe, but across the board all over the world. Otherwise, the current trends are going to be exacerbated. Industry leaving, Germany, and this can certainly not be in our interest. For the time being, we're still compensating for a number of these effects because we've got great teams. We can, combine ideal processes with ideal technology, but there's a natural limit to that sooner or later. And other countries do have excellent engineers too, so we better watch out what's happening on that front. Energy costs shouldn't be, the reason for us to be out of competition.
So can I just sum that up? So if I understand you correctly, you all say that in terms of our know-how, we're well positioned in Germany. We can compensate for quite some factors, but when it comes to energy, we do have challenges here that we should be worried about. Now, I would also like to talk about the second aspect that we already mentioned, namely raw materials. I'm specifically thinking or looking at Mr. Reuter here. The impression here is that there is a bit of tension here. On the one hand, on one hand, we have growing requirements with regard to carbon footprints and balances. And on the other hand, we have dwindling supplies with regard to raw materials, or the situation has become more difficult. What's happening on the raw material markets, Mr. Reuters?
Well, if you look at the European raw material markets, they are driven by energy prices, and we all know what's happening these days. The semiconductor crisis is persisting. We're very much dependent on imports, and the Chinese, for example, they export a lot of this stuff. And talking about magnesium, they've reduced their production because energy costs are simply too high, and air pollution, was not in line with the Chinese standards. So the dependence is huge indeed. Now, I was very interested to listen to Ms. Heinel's contribution on sustainability. Very interesting. But, recycling cannot substitute growth markets because our products have a long life. Window profiles in the automotive industry, railway industry, and the aircraft industry, they have a very long service life, much more than a couple of months, which is why we need raw materials. And Europe is becoming less and less attractive for major companies because of the, framework conditions for producing raw materials.
And the availability of this circular material, which also plays an important role when it comes to reducing our carbon footprints, is or has been difficult in the last couple of months in Europe. Can you tell us, from your viewpoint, can you tell us what it looks like?
Well, aluminium die casting. Up until, the IC combustion was the state-of-the-art technology, was very sustainable. Typical alloys for the engine block or the cylinder casing for the crankshaft, was made 100% of aluminium. But seeing the shift to e-mobility away from the IC combustion, there's new requirements of the battery case, corrosion properties. Increasingly so, only primary aluminium will be used, and the scrap metal that is recycled will only come back in 15 to 20 years or so. So scrap aluminium is just not available for reuse, for recycling. However, seeing the the vocal calls for sustainability, everybody would like to make their products 100% from scrap metal. However, when it comes to aluminium, the situation is such that 75% of the aluminium that is used is still engaged in the circuit. It's still part of the window profile in the aircraft, cannot be used, cannot be recycled. And if you assume further growth in aluminium, and the same goes for magnesium, 25% will be down to 10% of scrap metal, even though the consumer would like to see a 100% ratio, and that's just not going to work in growth markets. We need to be very clear about that. So there is a true risk of doing greenwashing by saying that everything is made of recyclable material. We would have to produce scrap metal, but that wouldn't be economical either.
Mr. Fischer, from your perspective, from business operations, what do you think this looks like, especially when it comes to circular materials?
We do a lot of recycling. This is the big benefit of lightweight metal. It is 100% recyclable. So, whatever comes up in terms of scrap metal is recycled directly on site, 100%. But of course, we also need a new material. The markets are growing. That's my assessment. They will keep growing, and die casting is primarily dependent on the automotive industry. And when it comes to heavy-duty e-vehicles, there will be increasing pressure for lightweight solutions. So lightweight metals will be in greater demand, which is why we are going to need a new metal too going forward. And also, you shouldn't forget, in terms of magnesium, we depend on China, 90%, even though it's available almost everywhere. And here, I think, we'll need politics to come in so that we've got planning certainty also outside of China, in Eastern Europe, for example. These should be, sourcing markets, because we have to get out of that dependency on China. That's very important.
Okay, then let us do the following. Let us look at the world, especially at Asia, and discuss the question of what our dependency on China, especially with regard to magnesium, actually looks like. Is China the large competitor for the die casting industry? This question also goes to you, Mr. Ioannidis. Is this also a large market for machines? How would you evaluate the situation?
Well, first of all, China is a huge market. There can be no doubt about that. However, if you want to serve that market, you have to be present on site. graphite. The dependence on China in terms of raw materials is huge. However, not only in terms of raw materials, but also when it comes to rare earths, etc., which have become increasingly important. And here, the dependency is even bigger. I believe it's fair to say that China is also dependent on us. It's only vice versa. And we have to find a way forward, to merge our interests. And let's also not forget that, we can contribute a lot in terms of product design, but then lightweight construction, as Mr. Fischer says, will, increase in its importance also in China. They are forging ahead in terms of product design. They are very fast in terms of new developments, and they are, monitoring this very closely. And I believe that, they will use the materials they need instead of giving it away to others. So China is certainly a competitor, and what's even more important, where do we get the raw material from? It comes from China, 90%. We need to get away from that. That's, a key point.
I think there's another important aspect that comes into play here. We already heard it, was already mentioned also by Mr. Heiner, namely product design. In 2018, Apple made an announcement, and I think they actually implemented it later on, that in a certain product line, they wanted to use 100% recycled materials, secondary aluminium. And as far as I know, there was a lot of public relations around that. They also had certain machines that disassemble iron into primary components. So from your perspective, especially with regard to the automotive industry, is this nice but not really realizable at a large scale? Or where do we actually stand with regard to product design and the ODMs? Do we actually think about how to disassemble the products later on in order to reintroduce them into the circular economy?
Well, we've got some learning ahead of us on that front. The circular economy, what does this really mean? Well, it means that already at the design stage, you think how to, return it to the cradle, as it were. There's still room at the top, but then it's also true that we've already started, machines which have a long service life, and based on new calculation methods and new design, perhaps we can achieve material savings. That might be a starting point, a lever that we can pull. On the other hand, it's also true that we can build on what we already have, upgrade it, modernize it, and try and, generate greater efficiencies. However, product design, as far as I'm concerned, has to adopt a circular view going forward.
Do you know this, Mr. Reuter? Or what is your opinion, Mr. Reuter? Yes, I think it is indeed so. A lot has to be done. We haven't reached our goals yet. We also have to consider the fact that we are also under international cost pressure, and that sometimes the customers are not ready to carry these costs. So, for instance, looking at the transport sector, the alloys have changed completely. There are hybrid alloys now. It cannot be just one alloy. And actually, there are different scans that can be done in order for them to be marked in such a way that they can be returned in 15 years' time and actually disassembled without much effort later on and divided up. But however, that's a problem at the moment. At the moment, a lot of scrap metal, especially from the automotive industry, cannot be inserted into the same value creation chain anymore because they cannot be separated out properly. There are countries such as Sweden that have led the way here. For instance, if you want to insert a spare part into a washing machine, you don't have to pay VAT on it. And this also means, of course, or shows that there needs to be political pressure, otherwise we cannot do it, because the international competition is simply too large, and the costs in Europe, and especially in Germany, don't compensate or can't compete with those in China or other Asian countries where it's actually even cheaper.
Now, at this point in time, I would like to bring in our audience. We've received extremely interesting questions, partly on taxonomy and cost questions. One question is whether the foundries are going to have to, are they going to be able to pass on the cost increase to the customers? What about the acceptance on the customer's part?
No. Well, I would agree, yes. It would be very difficult to pass on the entire costs to the customers. You need support there, especially from the equipment manufacturers and the machine manufacturers. There need to be good services, good products, a good interpretation of data, of what this process actually achieves, optimizing these processes. Only in such a way would it be possible to generate profits, because you cannot pass on the costs to 100%.
Another question is to do with a technical point about competencies, in Germany. So what about the maturity of this particular approach? Well, salt core die casting is something I've been doing for 20 years or so, and so far, I haven't come across, a field of application where this might make any sense. There may be exceptions, but, the broad rollout of this particular technology is something that I'm not envisaging for the time being, especially for our products, for forestry and gardening applications. I don't think that this is a feasible option. However, we will monitor this closely.
So what is the cost situation for you? You are also subject to economic pressures. You do your own die casting for the products that you produce. When you look at the competition, has this become a topic for you? Higher costs, meaning higher costs due to energy or procurement prices?
Of course, that's a big issue, and we're trying to compensate that one way or the other. However, when you look at, the raw material situation, that's beyond, any improvement options, this will only increase the pressure, and everybody is experiencing this pressure, which is extreme these days.
So, if we summarize the status quo, we can say that we've already channeled various topics here. We've said that the energy prices are an important topic. We talked about the raw material situation and also about locations. Now, the three of you shared the evaluation that we might be a bit slow in Germany in terms of our processes, and that we may be at a disadvantage compared to other markets. Did I understand you correctly when it came to product design, just to wrap this up, that even here there is potential for improvement?
Well, there is certainly a potential, and we are definitely moving in the right direction. Lightweight metals certainly are easy to separate or segregate. There's even a bigger potential in my mind, when it comes to used machines or used window frames. We better collect them and, reintroduce them to the circuit. They last for 30 or 40 years, and there's certainly a huge potential for the old machines to be reused. Everybody's talking about scrapping, which has got this somewhat negative annotation, but basically we're talking about new raw materials, which are very valuable, and we need to, improve the reputation of scrap metal, because they're much better than you give them credit for.
So maybe we can make the case here for the die casting industry, because as opposed to plastics, we actually have very consistent material features. We can actually use the circular economy, and we can also substitute plastic. That has played a role also in the competition that we saw earlier. And this is quite a good follow-up on one of the audience questions that we received with regard to sustainability, namely about Scope 3 emissions in the realization of sustainability goals. With regard to Scope 3, how are these measured in a systematic way? Does one of you want to make a remark about this?
Well, if I may, sustainability, the CO2 footprint, is an issue which has gathered enormous speed recently, and we are busy trying to catch up with the sheer speed that this development has assumed. Now, Scope 3 is already becoming visible at the horizon, but let me also tell you that it's going to take a long, long time before we can even think of, a credible assessment of Scope 3 emissions and assessing and reducing the CO2 footprint in the Scope 3. Same assessment from me, Scope 1 and Scope 2. We are well underway of achieving the objectives. When it comes to Scope 2, well, we have to look at it right from the start. right to the very end, and that's certainly going to keep us busy going forward.
So I would like to continue with the questions from the audience, because they are not always very positive, but they sometimes really put the finger on some delicate subjects. For instance, Christoph, do you expect a higher number of merger activities or insolvencies in Europe due to the higher energy prices, a topic that we already talked about?
Well, looking at rising energy prices, that may not be so much of a factor, but one thing is sure, we need to invest. The industry needs to invest. We're looking at 3 years which have been rather difficult. We all remember 2018, 2019, when the recession hit, and then the pandemic struck, adding insult to industry, to injury. However, this has eaten up a lot of capital, and we need to build up that capital base. And, investment will still be needed in some companies in modern machinery, modern processes, and this may mean that M&A, mergers, acquisitions, may come in handy, to form larger conglomerations, provided the capital is available. I mean, everyone needs capital, and mergers, acquisitions may be a way forward.
Mr. Reuter, what's your international view on this?
Well, there's certainly a risk out there, and Mr. Ioannidis said that investment is urgently needed. So, the past 2 to 3 years have been very challenging for the die casting industry, for aluminium particularly. I cannot say how difficult it was for magnesium. And I can see that many companies have a weak capital base, and there will be further consolidation in the industry, that's for sure. Also, in Europe, the market is highly fragmented. There's a lot of die casting foundries who are making lives, difficult for one another. And they're only living in a revenues world and not a profit world, as it were. Not all of them, but many do.
So let us look at the last part of the session, looking at what might be expecting us on a technical and economic, on the technical and economic side of things. Here, a question from Matthias Oberneisser: what kind of opportunities and risks do we face here? This is a question that I would also hear your evaluation about. Mr. Reuter, you were the last one to talk. Why don't you just keep going?
It's great to see what's happening out there. E-mobility comes with huge opportunities for aluminium, particularly lightweight construction will be key. So, applications will be different, the alloys will be different, but it's certainly a growth market. And the share of aluminium will certainly grow. However, I need to also tell you, and Mr. Ioannidis will know much better, the requirements in terms of dimensions will be different from what you are used to from the past, which means that our customers will have to invest massively to do this kind of investment.
So then let us continue with the mechanical engineer here.
Now, e-mobility is certainly an opportunity because we're going to have to deal with components, parts, which will be different. In parallel, we're also going to have to deal with, legacy parts, and this has to be done with the available funding. This will require a lot of flexibility on our part. We have to continue doing what we've done so far, whilst not, neglecting future challenges. E-mobility won't, start from 0 to 100. It will be a gradual process which will develop over time, and this will come with a number of opportunities and possibilities for us. However, processes will change. Digitization will play an increasing role. It will impact the process parameters. But one thing is sure, it will be a learning curve that we are all going to have to go through, and ultimately we will be able to say, okay, we've managed to benefit from a number of opportunities, so I have a positive outlook.
Mr. Fischer, you of course can share an overview of the entire die casting industry.
Now, when it comes to the drivetrain, I think there's great prospects out there. Today, e-vehicles tend to be very heavy, and that's why lightweight construction will play an increasing role going forward. Now, the focus currently is on the drivetrain, batteries, etc., and not so much on, the aspects of lightweight construction. It will lead to massive changes. This will come with a cost in terms of money and time, as Mr. Ioannidis said, and there's not so much funding available in many die-casting foundries, and that's why for some of them life will be more difficult, but bottom line, is that it's an opportunity for everybody. We may also have to think about alternative concepts. Autonomous driving, carpooling might certainly be an option, using fewer vehicles. I don't know what the future holds as far as this is concerned, but, we're not at the end yet, and more is yet to come, and it will take some time before we will see, reliable answers to our questions.
Well, we have another question, slightly more complex. I'm going to read it out because I think you can answer it quite quickly. Would it be possible to create a joint venture formed by German companies in order to produce in another country and supply raw material to European companies, increasing competitiveness against China? Could this be a solution? So, suggesting a collaboration across company borders. Is something like that even thinkable?
Well, if I may take that question, well, not necessarily so. It is possible, certainly, but, the impediment would be the framework conditions, planning certainty, and this is where our politicians need to take action. Once the political or regulatory framework is right, it's certainly possible for something like that to happen. And there are certainly activities out there already which go in that direction, which could benefit from a regulatory environment.
Of course, if we do something, others can also do something. They won't just sit and watch. So, of course, these framework conditions, or at least our planning horizon, has to become more stable.
Now, speaking about planning and planning certainty, that's certainly an important aspect. I'd like to come back to the economic prospects and the outlook to conclude. Now, COVID-19 and the chip crisis, which is still a fact, sooner or later we're going to get out of it. Will there be, catch-up demands after the COVID crisis? Will there be sort of a boom? What's your assessment?
Well, I think it is the case. During Corona, certain industries flourished. Look at the construction industry in Germany, for instance, or look at your industry, Mr. Fischer. But of course, there's a host of other industries that have suffered, and there will be the need to catch up on things, because of course we have an issue with the supply chains at the moment. We need to reduce that in 2022. And then, of course, demand will increase, and I think we can safely say that we will see increased demand.
This catching up has already started. Just look at the first 6 months of 2020 and 2021. Many of the foundries were operating at full steam until they hit the supply chain bottlenecks with the customers or the raw material supplies. You spoke about magnesium, aluminium. So against that backdrop, I think it's fair to assume that there's going to be some catching up. The more interesting question will be, how will we prepare for the time after this catching up is over, to not be over-invested?
Well, a question by Mr. Knörren. What do you think about the market for gigacastings, machines over 4,500 tons? What's your impression? I think this is a question to the both of you.
Well, there is such a market to accommodate these kind of machines, and it will certainly expand going forward. It's very, top of mind in terms of investments. It's an important segment. On the other hand, you need to know, and I'm thinking about, a 10-year horizon, there might ultimately be new concepts. Just imagine, what batteries looked like 10 years ago and, how the size has been reduced in our smartphones. But it's certainly a good thing, to think about the battery casing, and that's what these huge machines will be required for. It's this very specific specialist market, which will certainly grow, but it won't be as flexible as the market for smaller machines, so it will be limited somewhat. And also think about, the peripherals. It's not only the machine. Such an investment will have to look at many more components. So we're talking about huge facilities, huge plants, and you need the staff to operate a three-shift mode.
Now, this sounds rather positive. Mr. Reuter, would you like to say a couple of closing words? Yes, I can actually follow up on what my colleague said. We can see that there is a demand for capacities in our industry, because the outlook for this year is rather positive from the customer end. What we can actually realize remains to be seen, but I think this catch-up effect will mean that once semiconductors become available again in the automotive sector, and when the negative load with regard to energy costs for consumers isn't too high, we will also see the economy picking up again.
Okay, I'd like to conclude on that positive outlook. We've looked at a number of, potentials in terms of what's possible in technical and economical terms in the industry. So there is a positive potential. Thank you for this positive summary. Let's now, rearrange the stage. See you soon.
Ja, herzlich willkommen zurück nach dieser kurzen Umbaupause.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Now, this was certainly a very interesting industry talk, highlighting some of the key aspects that are going to keep us busy in 2022. Now, I'm pretty certain that we could have spent much more time discussing, and, we've used up all of our time basically already, but this only goes to show how important personal encounters are, live debates, and I am certain that EUROGUSS come June will be an excellent forum for just that. Now, for all those of you who would like to dig a little deeper in terms of sustainability, I'd like to inform you that headed by Martin Vogt at the conference in October, there was a panel discussion which you can view again on the EUROGUSS YouTube channel. By the way, you will also be able to watch the recording of today's studio edition at the aforementioned YouTube channel. Now, if you've listened to us closely for 90 minutes or so, you will have noticed that one category is still missing, the aluminium category. In terms of the sheer volume, this is certainly the most important material for die casting. Before we announce the winners, Martin, I have a question. Where were the entries coming from? Well, basically, we received a whole lot of entries, first and foremost relating to the metals themselves, because, zinc, magnesium, and aluminum tend to be used in different product categories, and this is why we've received a broad range of entries. Now, regarding the competition as a whole, I think it's fair to say that we've received a broad range of different entries, household applications, electronics. There's one component from a coffee grinder where the component plays a key role, but there is a clear focus, of course. And if you are familiar with die casting, you will know that the automotive industry plays a key role here. And, we've received components which are used in the automotive industry. So let's take a look at the winners in the aluminium category. And I suggest we start the film. Here's the winners in the aluminium category. Third place. It's the case, the printed pattern, a combination with an innovative additive manufacturing approach, and it has pushed, conventional durability limits with special temperature control measures, and you can see the dimensions. So this is the third place from Matthias Struckers in Rendsburg, Germany. Here comes the second place, the system carrier, a lightweight construction part with many apertures, special requirements in terms of the bonding and electronics contact surfaces, and you can read the dimensions yourself. And here's the second place. There was a points tie, as you might like to know. The SP52 housing bottom part. It's a holistic approach to work out the most economical solution. It's a one-piece design, and it substitutes 16 individual parts. It comes with the weld seams, and it's much less heavy than if it were made in conventional sheet metal. So this is the second place. First place. It's the one-piece upper shell of a die-cast rear axle beam. High level of functional integration, topology-optimized design, and you can read the dimensions.
Ja, das sind sie also, die Gewinner in der Kategorie Aluminium.
Here are the winners in the aluminium category, and once again we are happy to welcome representatives of the companies at the studio in order to hand over the awards. Third place goes to Matthias Struckers GmbH und Co. KG. Congratulations to this company from Northern
von der
Germany.
Firma BMW aus Landshut, und zwar Olaf Henschel, Teamkoordinator Prozessplanung Druckus, und Thomas Pöppel, Leitung der Vorentwicklung. Herzlichen Glückwunsch und herzlich willkommen hier im Studio.
Congratulations and welcome to the
Ja,
studio.
Glückwunsch.
Ja, Glückwunsch.
Genau, einmal der Award für Sie
This is your awards.
und nochmal die Urkunde. Das passt perfekt, dass Sie zu zweit sind.
Vielen Dank. Wir freuen uns
Very
sehr.
handy for you to have come, the both of you. Thank you for this award. Thank you to the jury, and thank you to Landshut for the great die casting team that did excellent work here. Thank you for your visit, and congratulations on winning the second place.
Ja, wir können richtig zählen. Wir haben tatsächlich einen
We are
Gleichstand.
able to count, of course. We had a tie in our evaluation. Earlier on, we analyzed the way that this evaluation happened, and so we have a shared second place. The second place goes to Alvarez from Brixen, and we are happy to welcome Oliver Jans, CEO, and Stefan Bloner, CTO, from Alupress. Congratulations on winning the second place in the aluminium category. Congratulations. Thank you very much to the jury for awarding us this wonderful prize. We would also like to say thank you to our team. The team was very motivated, made a lot of effort in order to realize this project. Thank you also to our very highly esteemed customer Bosch. They allowed us to actually submit this product and take part in the competition, and that motivates us, of course, in order to dive deeper into this business and to maybe even participate with Dixon Molding in the competition in the coming years. Thank you very much and congratulations. Thank you.
Ja, und da kommen wir heute
tatsächlich
zum letzten Preis. Genau.
Platz. Ich wollte
Now, moving on to the last winner. And of course, it's also important, for the customers to approve of submitting these entries. So we're very happy, to have received so many specimens. Now, first place goes to Handmann Metallguss GmbH & Co. KG. I'd like to welcome the chairman of the management board, Wolfgang Schmidt, and the head of technical development, Andreas Würzer. Congratulations to you, gentlemen.
Herzlichen Glückwunsch.
Congratulations, here's your certificate.
Vielen Dank an die Jury für die gute Bewertung, den ersten Platz. Und für die Handmänner, die im Livestream sind, herzlichen Glückwunsch an euch und herzlichen Dank an das tolle Team.
Congratulations to you and to the team.
Auch von meiner Seite vielen Dank für den Preis. Ich freue mich sehr darüber. Ich denke, unser Bauteil und auch der dazugehörige Preis zeigt, welche Innovationskraft in der Vermarktung steckt. Und deswegen auch herzliche Grüße an die ganze Mannschaft in Biberach. Das Ganze ist euer Verdienst. Vielen Dank.
Team in Biberach, this thanks goes to you. Congratulations once again.
Ja, Chris, ich glaube, das war ein schönes Stichwort.
Chris, that's a great word. Thanking the members of staff, because after all, it's always about teamwork, and this also goes for the work of the jury. Let's listen to Tobias Rennings and to see what he has to say about the components from a technical point of view.
Kommen wir damit zu den Details im Aluminium. Beim Rang 1 prämieren wir insbesondere die hohe Funktionsintegration mit diversen Anbindungspunkten.
We see highly functional integration with many joining parts, and they also topologically optimized design with an integrated insert in the form of a hollow profile. In the shared second place, we have a housing bottom port. For the first time, this was designed as one piece, and it replaces a total of 16 individual components. There are huge weight savings that have been made here of around 6 kilos. This is one of the first serial parts in Europe with a machine size of over 5,000 tons. Apart from that, we also have a component and a very robust die-cast design with high surface requirements. It has very thin walls and high form stability. It's also another very innovative product is the third place. This is a component that was made in an add-on procedure, meaning that it was a printed core. And this has actually overcome the current limits of die-casting procedures because this couldn't have been produced by conventional means. And this leads us to a final evaluation of the competition from the jury's viewpoint. Now, I'd like to remember our jury meeting in autumn. All of the components were present at Haus der Gießereiindustrie, and I have to say that this was a very impressive performance display from our industry. A high density of innovation, many new solutions for our customers were presented there.
Well, the third competition just goes to show the, the power density, as it were, the high level, the high quality level. Now, Chris just spoke about, the display of performance, and that's what it really is, an impressive showcase for the material and for the die casting industry. Now, what's been the winners' responses? Let's take a look at that.
Vielen Dank für den europäischen
Thank you very much for the European Die Casting Award 2022. Very happy indeed to be receiving this award. My thanks goes out to the whole project team and my team. This was a great, performance on your part.
Ja, herzlichen Glückwunsch nochmal jetzt abschließend an alle Gewinner. Und an dieser Stelle möchte ich auch nochmal alle Unternehmen, die jetzt vielleicht im Stream die EUROGUSS Studio Edition
any companies joining the EUROGUSS Studio Edition remotely, let me tell you, or let me encourage you to submit your innovative products to the next award competition. And I think we also saw this in the videos today. There was a wonderful display of emotions. There's so much passion that goes into the development of these products. You can really see that in the videos. This makes us very happy, but it also shows just how important the European die casting competition is.
Well, this was a great example of work ethic. Please, give us more work. Keep more components coming to the House of Gießerei industry, so that our jury will have much more work to do, looking at components, etc., so as to see where we are headed. Because it's similar to lottery. Unless you participate, you have no chance of winning. And speaking about winning, one category is still open. It's the audience award.
Now it's your turn again. You can vote for your favorite product. Maybe you left your little window open earlier on. In that case, you could actually see the questions right away. If not, you might see a QR code displayed on screen that you can actually scan with your smartphone. Or you go to menti.com, entering 844744042. And once we see the first results, we have a 60-second countdown, so you don't have all that much time. So think carefully, which product was your favorite amongst the components that we saw in the last 90 minutes here in the different material categories?
Ja, jetzt wird's spannend. Es kann nur eine Stimme abgegeben.
It's got to be interesting. Everybody's got one vote, and we are seeing first votes are being submitted.
Aber ich glaube, wir sind jetzt so schnell, wir können gar keine Spekulation.
It's going so quickly, can't even speculate.
Ja, einem Favorit aus mit 44%. Aber vielleicht übergebe ich doch mal an dich, Martin.
Well, it's difficult. It looks like we have a favorite with 44%, but let me hand over to you, Martin. In the past, you were working in sports, and maybe this is a great moment to comment on a 400-meter run.
Or the penalty shootout in football, indeed. This is the single shell, upper shell, Albert Handmann. That's the piece that we looked at last. So it seems like, it's assumed a leading position. Who's coming up at position 3? BMW, Landshut. Seems like these are the, favorites amongst the audience. Has anything changed? Well, I think it's fair to say that Handmann has managed to extend its lead over the competitors. So one more goal scored in football terminology. Ranking second, and it's a very tight race because, Handmann maintaining its leading position. However, ladies and gentlemen, you can still make a difference. How much time do we have left? Can things still change? Well, seems like a runner-up is emerging from the crowd, taking the last corner, entering the final stretch of the race. One more time, that's the crossbar from GF Casting Solutions, and I must admit, a quite sophisticated component. Moving past BMW Landshut, coming from behind, and still lagging slightly behind Handmann, 26 to 16. Well, that's a comfortable lead. but it's still a neck-and-neck race. Also, Alupress Brixen vying for the second position, a very tight race.
I think we have a decision here. We can see a clear lead, and I think if we look back, we can see it was a very tight race for the second and third places. In third place, if I see this correctly, we have the component by Alupress from Brixen, place 2 GF Casting Solutions, and then quite a clear winner, Chris. Yes, it looks as though the company Handmann actually also won the first audience award or prize. We just had the colleagues here on stage. They are on site, and they will be receiving their award later on. So a round of applause for the winner. Congratulations.
Well, this is the end of the EUROGUSS Studio Edition, Chris. And of course, I'd be happy if you, ladies and gentlemen, felt that the past 90 minutes or so were interesting. If you liked what you've seen and heard, and I must admit that the cooperation between House the Industry and EUROGUSS has been great.
Yes, I agree. Thank you very much to you, Martin, too, for hosting this session with me. I really enjoyed it. I think the team also did. It was a very good way of kicking off 2022, and I think we can all look forward to EUROGUSS. And on that note, I would also like to thank all of the participants behind the screens. I would like to thank our guests here at the studio, those who joined us remotely, and of course, something that we see but you may not behind the screens, I would like to thank the entire team behind the camera. And we already look forward to welcoming you from the 8th to 10th of June 2022 in Nuremberg. I would also like to note that today's session was recorded, and you will probably find it on our EUROGUSS YouTube account in the next couple of days. So stay healthy and see you on the 8th of June in Nuremberg.